Hello, my name is Jill Warren. I'm going to be talking to you today about research. So why do we do research projects? I always like to think of research as being a bit like a whodunit, and it's a detective thing that we know what we want to do and we've really got to find the answer to that. So we do research projects to find out the questions or the answers to the questions that we've posed. And the way we do that is, first of all, we look at formulate the question, if you like. We find out what's happened. In a question of a whodunit, it's who's died. Next, we need to plan the inquiry, find out the information that we actually need and from which sources. And this is what we're going to be talking about in a separate session. Thirdly, we need to work out how we extract the information, how we collate all the information together and assimilate relevant information and discard the other. And fourthly, we need to produce and present results and draw conclusions. So what we're focusing on today is step 3, which is the carry out the research. And obviously, really, the point about good research is that we're trying to increase our understanding about a particular area. And there are two main sorts of research. First is primary research, which is the stuff that you actually do directly yourself. This includes things like questionnaires and case studies, where you actually ask people very direct, involved questions. And the second area is that of secondary research, which is research that's already been done before, basically, by others, and it's available for you, and it's about gathering all of that information and putting what you're doing into context. I mean, the key thing is that each side has its own advantages and disadvantages, and within any research project you'd actually need to make sure that you've actually got both sorts of research. And in fact, what we're suggesting is that you have a minimum of 3 forms of primary research and 3 sources of secondary research for this project. So quantitative research, which basically means getting data in, and that's collating data from things like questionnaires or from things like raw data if you actually do your own analysis. In my case, looking at things like box office receipts for a musical. And the second area is qualitative research, and this is much more narrow, and it's looking much more in depth, and this can be really good in terms of getting a real understanding from somebody who's been there, who's done it. And you do that through questionnaires or questions to detailed interviews with people who were around at the time, looking at case studies and looking at focus groups, which is just a posh word for saying people who've got the same categories such as gender and age and the like as the area that you're actually looking at. So really the point about the objective, if you like, of research, it's going to be to try and obtain information to test a particular hypothesis, to come up with some answers. Primary research needs to be unbiased and objective as possible, and it needs to be measurable and comparable. And the reason that we have the 2 separate areas, the quantitative research, the one about the data, that's always going to be objective, and hopefully it will be unbiased if you have a very large sample, and make it measurable and comparable. The disadvantage with quantitative research is that it tends to be very superficial, whereas with qualitative research, although it's going to be subjective because it's usually looking at one particular case study or one particular individual, you actually get a much deeper view and insight into what you're looking at. So really, if a good piece of research will take both the quantitative and the qualitative research. So case studies, basically case studies are just an in-depth view of a particular subject, and really what you need to do is to be able to take the information that you've got already from your other research and bring that together and ask some relevant questions of individuals. And in this, we suggest that you actually look at 3 separate case studies or questionnaires. And questionnaires, really the point here is it needs to be representative of the population as a whole, or at least representative of the population subject area that you're interested in. For example, I'm interested in musicals, in particular musicals for children. And so in terms of doing a questionnaire, I went round and asked people who had taken their children to a musical at a musical theatre, and I actually put the questionnaires and asked about the marketing of a children's musical to them. The key thing with questionnaires is don't ask leading questions. That is where you expect to get a yes or no answer, or you're expecting a particular answer. One way of getting around this is actually to put things like multiple choice questions in. Key thing is with questionnaires, keep it simple, keep it short. Try not to ask more than one question per question, if you see what I mean. It's very easy to get confused which question are you actually asking. And if you want easy data collection and analysis, that is, you can compare and contrast very, very simply, then ask closed questions, those requiring a yes or a no answer, or multiple choice questions. But if you want more detailed, in-depth questions, then ask open questions. Although again, it can be more difficult to present the information from there. And the final thing is carry out your questionnaire at an appropriate time. Obviously, if I was dealing with children's musicals, there's no point going when there's an adult show being produced. Secondary research. So this includes basically everything else, something that's been done by the people. And you can look at things like the internet and in libraries and reviewing your journals, books, and it covers things like DVDs and videos, of course, as well. On internet research, but basically what you need to do is to narrow your topic down to a few key descriptions, which are keywords. Use a search engine to find the relevant pages. And again, don't go to Wikipedia. Well, you can go to Wikipedia first, but use that as a source of gathering further information. The point about Wikipedia is that anybody can update it, and you don't know who they are. So really the point is that you need to go to known, respected, reviewed websites. Who's written the article? You know, what are their qualifications? What's their expertise? Are they an expert in that? Which is why it's useful going to professional portals. And just some practicalities in terms of, obviously, if you put something in, some keywords in, you get too many responses, then you need to put more keywords in or use different keyword combinations and advanced search options. And remember, the internet is not just for few keywords. You can actually look at various academic sources online, newspapers and journals, which is very useful, as well as using the resources that are available in the library. So, tips for doing research. Bear in mind, what's the question that you're actually trying to get the answer to? It's very easy to get sidetracked and go down topics, even though they may be really interesting. It's about, no, can't do that. I've got to focus on this particular question. And you need to know where you're going with the questions that you're actually asking as well. You know, why are you asking the question that you're asking? What information will you use? How will you use that information? How will you display that information later on? And in order to answer the whole query, you need to be able to say why you've chosen that particular method for that particular way of going about it, and knowing what the potential biases of the results, which might colour your results. So, in summary, you need to be able to answer these questions. Is the subject of your research easy to pose into one simple question? If it can't, you need to tighten it up. You don't have time to do a big rambling dissertation on something. This has got to be very focused and very clear, but can be very useful all the same. You also need to place your topic in context of what else is going on. So, for example, if you're taking a particular genre, in my case musicals, I'd need to be able to make sure that I've put it how new musicals have changed. Is there a market for new musicals? You know, what's the history of musicals? And Thirdly, we need to make sure, have you actually planned how you're going to go about it with key milestones? Again, that's an area I'll be looking at elsewhere. You also need to be able to justify and evaluate your choice of primary sources of information. As I say, you need a minimum of 3 primary sources of information, information that you've gathered yourself, and also 3 forms of secondary sources, for example, books, journals, internet, DVD. Obviously the key thing there is the primary sources of information. It takes forever to try and get that, so the earlier you start and get that organised, the better, really. And finally, have you displayed the results of your quantitative data in different ways, for example in graphs, charts and write-ups? Okay, and that's it. Thank you very much.